The stack of $100 bills hit the diner table with a heavy, rhythmic thud, exactly 365 days after Clara Vance had handed Elias Thorne a crumpled $20 bill and a prayer. The sound made everyone in Rosie's 24-hour diner turn and stare. Clara froze mid-pour, coffee pot trembling in her hand as she looked at the man sitting in booth 7. The same booth where, 1 year ago, she'd made the decision that destroyed her life. Elias Thorne didn't look broken anymore. Gone was the hollow-eyed man in the wrinkled black shirt, hands shaking over cold coffee. This Elias wore a tailored coat that probably cost more than Clara made in 6 months. His eyes were clear, focused, burning with something that looked like vindication. 365, he said quietly, tapping the stack of bills. One for every day I promised I'd come back. Clara's co-worker, Denise, let out a sharp laugh from behind the counter. No way. No freaking way. St. Clara, actually. But Clara wasn't listening. She was remembering that night. The rain. The desperation in Elias's voice as he'd explained his solution for the city's failing power grid. The way her sister had screamed at her. Asterisk, you just traded your roof for a loser's dream. Asterisk. The eviction notice that came 2 weeks later. The months of living in her car. The mockery that followed her everywhere. The saint of fools, they'd called her. And now Elias was back, sitting in the same booth, with a briefcase beside him and that look in his eyes, the one that said everything had changed. Clara, he said, sliding an envelope across the table. Your $20 bought the component that saved this city. Now I'm here to show you exactly what your heart was worth. Outside, through the rain-streaked windows, the city lights flickered once, twice, then blazed brighter than they had in years. Will Clara's gamble on a stranger's vision finally vindicate her sacrifice? Subscribe now to find out what happens when kindness becomes currency, and comment below with the country you're watching from. After you hit that subscribe button, I promise you, you're going to have a blessed week. Let's see who else believes in betting on the human heart. It was 11:47 p.m. when Clara first saw him, and she knew immediately that he was the kind of broken that didn't come from alcohol or drugs. Elias Thorne sat in booth 7 with his head in his hands, a cold cup of coffee going colder in front of him. His black shirt was wrinkled like he'd been wearing it for days, and his hands trembled when he reached for the cup. Don't! Denise grabbed Clara's arm as she reached for the coffee pot. That guy's been nursing 1 cup for 3 hours. He's got nothing, probably waiting for someone stupid enough to feel sorry for him. But Clara had already seen his eyes when he looked up. They weren't the eyes of a con artist. They were the eyes of someone who'd seen the solution and couldn't make anyone else see it. The eyes of a builder watching his blueprints burn. She refilled his coffee anyway. On the house, she said quietly. I don't need charity. His voice was rough, defensive. I need $20 and a hardware store that's still open. Hardware store. Clara pulled out her order pad, curious despite herself. At midnight. There's one on 5th that stays open until 1. I need a specific relay switch. Model RX 47. It's the last piece. The only piece. He laughed, a sound like breaking glass. I've got a solution that could save this entire city's power grid, and I'm $20 short of proving it. Denise snorted from behind the counter. Clara, that's the oldest scam in the book. But Clara was already opening her apron pocket, pulling out the folded bills she'd been saving for rent. $23.47. Everything she had until Friday's paycheck. She peeled off a 20 and set it on the table. What are you doing? Elias stared at the bill like it might explode. Buying a relay switch, Clara said simply. And maybe saving a city. His hand shot across the table, gripping her wrist. Not hard, but desperate. I'll pay you back. I swear on everything I've left, I'll pay you back. I know, Clara said, though she didn't know anything except that some instinct deeper than logic was screaming at her to trust this stranger. She watched him leave, running into the rain toward 5th Street. Denise shook her head. You just flush your rent down the toilet, St. Clara. Hope it felt good. It didn't feel good. It felt terrifying. But it also felt right in a way Clara couldn't explain, like she'd just made the most important investment of her life in something that couldn't be measured on any ledger except the human heart. The rain kept falling. Booth 7 stayed empty. And Clara went back to pouring coffee for people who'd never risk a dime on anyone's dream but their own. 3 years before Clara handed Elias Thorne her last $20, he'd been the golden boy of urban infrastructure. At 31, he designed a hybrid power management system that kept Seattle running during the 2019 Arctic blast. TechNow magazine called him the grid whisperer. Investment firms threw money at him like confetti. Then came the Chicago project, the one that was supposed to revolutionize how cities handle power distribution. Elias promised a system that would reduce energy waste by 40%, prevent blackouts, and pay for itself in 5 years. The city invested $80 million. Venture capitalists added another $120 million. The system failed spectacularly 6 months after installation. A cascade failure during a summer heat wave left 2 million people without power for 72 hours. 4 people died in the blackout. Hospitals ran on backup generators. The financial losses topped $3 billion. The investigation revealed that Elias had used an experimental AI algorithm that hadn't been properly tested. He'd been so convinced of his brilliance, so sure he'd solved the unsolvable problem, that he'd skipped 3 critical safety protocols. The algorithm had a fatal flaw in its load-balancing subroutines, a flaw that any decent QA team would have caught. But Elias had been working 18-hour days, sleeping in his office, convinced that speed mattered more than caution. He'd thought he was racing to save cities. Instead, he'd nearly destroyed one. The lawsuits bankrupted him within 8 months. His company dissolved. His patents were seized and sold to cover damages. Every tech firm in America blacklisted him. His face became synonymous with hubris and failure, plastered across business magazines with headlines like "The Man Who Broke Chicago" and "From Whisper to Warning." By the time he stumbled into Rosie's 24-hour diner that rainy November night, Elias Thorne owned exactly one thing: a redesigned system that fixed every flaw in the Chicago disaster. A system so elegant, so perfectly balanced that it could transform urban power management forever. But nobody would listen to the man who'd already failed once. Nobody would invest a single dollar in his redemption. The city he'd moved to was dying slowly, its power grid held together with 40-year-old infrastructure and prayers. Brownouts were common. Full blackouts, inevitable. Elias had the solution. He just couldn't afford the final component to prove it. A $20 relay switch that would let him demonstrate his prototype to the one city council member who'd agreed to give him 15 minutes. 15 minutes to undo 3 years of disgrace. $20 standing between vindication and oblivion. And then a waitress with kind eyes and worn shoes had reached into her apron and handed him a miracle he didn't deserve. The eviction notice came on a Tuesday, taped to Clara's apartment door like a scarlet letter. She stared at the bold red letters. Notice to vacate premises, and felt something cold settle in her chest. 30 days to pay 3 months back rent or get out. She'd known it was coming. Every time she'd chosen groceries over partial rent payment. Every time she'd stretch her paycheck to cover gas and utilities instead of catching up on what she owed. But knowing didn't make the paper in her hands feel any less like a death sentence. "Oh, Clara." Her sister Rebecca's voice behind her dripped with that particular mixture of pity and contempt that only family could perfect. "Please tell me you finally came to your senses and asked Mom for a loan." Clara crumpled the notice, shoved it in her purse. "I'll figure it out." "Figure it out?" Rebecca followed her inside the small studio apartment. "You gave your rent money to a stranger, Clara. A con artist in a diner who told you some fairy tale about saving the city, and you just handed him everything you had. What exactly were you thinking?" "I was thinking he needed help." "He needed help." Rebecca laughed, sharp and bright and cruel. "You know what you need? A psychiatric evaluation. You traded your roof for a loser's dream. Do you understand that? You're going to be homeless because you couldn't tell the difference between kindness and stupidity." Clara started pulling clothes from her closet, folding them mechanically. She'd known this conversation was coming too. Had rehearsed responses in her head during every shift at the diner. But now that it was here, she found she had nothing to say except, it was the right thing to do. The right thing. Rebecca grabbed Clara's arm, spinning her around. The right thing is taking care of yourself first. The right thing is not sacrificing your entire life for someone you don't even know. Mom's right about you. You're too soft, too stupid. You can't survive in this city with that bleeding heart of yours. Wait, is Clara's sister right? Is kindness really just another word for foolishness in this cold world? Drop a comment if you've ever been called crazy for helping someone, and hit subscribe, because what happens next will shake you to your core. Which country are you watching from? Let me know below. Backhand index pointing down. Clara pulled her arm free and went back to packing. She had 4 weeks to find somewhere to live on a waitress salary that barely covered food. 4 weeks before she'd be sleeping in her car. 4 weeks to regret the moment she'd looked into Elias Thorne's desperate eyes and decided his dream was worth her security. Rebecca watched her pack in silence for a full minute. Then, softer, just ask Mom for money. She'll give it to you if you admit you were wrong. If you promise you'll stop with this St. Clara act. I wasn't wrong, Clara said quietly. And I'm not asking. She heard Rebecca leave, heard the door slam. Then she sat on her bed surrounded by half-packed boxes and let herself cry for exactly 5 minutes. 5 minutes to mourn the life she was losing. 5 minutes to feel the weight of her choice. Then she dried her eyes, finished packing, and went to work the dinner shift. Because Elias Thorne had taken her $20 and disappeared into the rain. But that didn't mean she regretted giving it to him. Some investments couldn't be measured in rent payments and security deposits. Some investments were made in the currency of faith, and you didn't know the return until the ledger of the universe finally balanced itself. Clara first saw him on the news 2 months after she'd moved into her car. She was eating cold Chinese food in the diner's back parking lot during her break when Denise came out with her phone. Isn't that your charity case? Denise turned the screen toward Clara. The headline read, Failed Tech CEO Squatting in Condemned Building. The grainy video showed someone who might have been Elias Thorne being escorted out of a basement by police. The reporter's voice was bright with schadenfreude. Elias Thorne, the disgraced engineer responsible for the Chicago blackout disaster, was discovered living illegally in the basement of a condemned warehouse on Industrial Boulevard. Sources say Thorne has been hiding from creditors while allegedly working on another doomed infrastructure project. Clara's hands went cold. That's him. Yeah, your $20 miracle worker squatting in a basement like a rat. Denise pocketed her phone. Still think you made a good investment? But Clara was already calculating. Industrial Boulevard was only 6 miles from the diner. If Elias was still there, if he was still working on his solution, maybe she could find him. Maybe she could know if her faith had been completely misplaced or if he was actually building something real. The rumors started circulating after that. Clara heard them in fragments, pieced together from customer conversations and news alerts on her phone. Elias Thorne spotted at a salvage yard, buying scrap metal. Elias Thorne trespassing at the municipal power station, claiming he was conducting research. Elias Thorne being chased from a bank by debt collectors. He'd become a ghost story, a cautionary tale whispered in business classes and investment firms. The brilliant engineer who'd fallen, so far he was literally living underground, still chasing the dream that had already destroyed him once. He's insane, Clara's manager, Roy, said during a slow afternoon shift. Read an article that said he's convinced the city's power grid will fail completely within a year. Says we're one bad storm away from a total collapse. The man's delusional. But Clara remembered the clarity in Elias's eyes that night in the diner. The way he described his solution with the precision of someone who'd mapped every circuit, tested every variable. That hadn't been delusion. That had been certainty. 3 months after the eviction, Clara was washing dishes when she saw him through the diner's back window. Just a glimpse. A figure in a dark jacket moving quickly through the alley, carrying what looked like a heavy case. He was thinner now, moving with the furtive energy of someone being hunted. She almost called out, almost ran after him, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the shame of her own situation, living in her car, showering at the gym, eating day-old diner food for every meal. Maybe she didn't want him to see what his borrowed $20 had cost her. Or maybe she understood that he was in a race against time and creditors and his own ruined reputation, and any distraction could be fatal. So she watched him disappear into the November darkness and went back to washing dishes. Faith didn't require proof. Faith required patience. And Clara had plenty of time to wait, even if she had to wait from the front seat of a 2008 Honda Civic with a broken heater and dreams that kept her warmer than any blanket. The storm hit on a February night when Clara's car wouldn't start and the temperature dropped to 18 degrees. She'd been living in that car for 4 months, parking in different lots to avoid security, showering at the 24-hour gym 2 blocks from Rosie's. She'd gotten good at being homeless, good at hiding the smell of her situation under perfume and determination. But tonight the battery was dead and her backup plan, sleeping in the diner's storage room, evaporated when Roy caught her trying to sneak in through the back door. No way, Clara. Insurance won't cover it if you get hurt on the property overnight. I'm sorry, but you can't stay here. Roy, it's 18 degrees. My car's dead. I just need somewhere warm until morning. There's a shelter on Madison Avenue. They'll take you. Clara had been to that shelter once. It was full of people more desperate than her, and she'd given up her spot to a woman with 2 kids. I'll figure something out. But there was nothing to figure out. She worked the dinner shift with her mind spinning through options that didn't exist. Her sister had made it clear she wouldn't help unless Clara apologized for the Elias situation. Her mother had stopped taking her calls. The gym was closed for renovations. Every church shelter in a 10-block radius was at capacity because of the storm. By 10 p.m., the temperature had dropped to 15 degrees. The forecast called for possible snow. Clara's hands shook as she poured coffee, and it wasn't from the cold yet. It was from the growing realization that tonight might be the night her body decided it had finally had enough. You okay? Marcus, the line cook, studied her with concern. You look pale. Just tired. The lie came automatically now, but Marcus wasn't buying it. Clara, where are you staying tonight? The question hung between them like an accusation. Clara opened her mouth to lie again, but what came out was, I don't know. The diner was almost empty when the first real gust of wind hit, rattling the windows hard enough to make everyone look up. The weather alert on the TV behind the counter switched from warning to emergency, severe winter storm. All residents advised to seek shelter immediately. Clara stood behind the counter, watching the snow start to fall, and felt something inside her finally break. Not her spirit. That was too stubborn to break. But her pride, her conviction that she could handle this alone, her belief that the sacrifice she'd made for Elias Thorne wouldn't kill her in the end. Marcus, she said quietly, can I sleep in your car? Just tonight. I'll be gone before dawn. You won't even know I was there. His expression shifted from concern to something worse. Pity. Clara, how long have you been? For months. Since right after I gave that guy my rent money. She laughed, sharp and bitter. Guess Rebecca was right. I traded my roof for a loser's dream, and now I'm going to freeze to death because of it. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. The storm was just beginning, and Clara was already broken by it. The blackout hit at 11:47 p.m., exactly 1 year to the minute after Clara had handed Elias Thorne a $20 bill in booth 7. The lights didn't flicker this time. They died instantly, completely, taking with them every electric hum and digital glow that made civilization feel safe. The diner plunged into absolute darkness. Someone screamed. Glass shattered as a customer knocked over their water. Then came the sound that made Clara's blood run cold. Sirens. Not 1 or 2, but dozens of them, spreading across the city like a mechanical plague. Emergency backup should kick in, Roy said, but his voice was uncertain in the darkness. Any second now. 10 seconds passed. 20. The backup generators stayed silent. Clara felt her way to the window and looked out at a city gone dark. Every streetlight dead. Every building black. No traffic signals, no store signs, no apartment windows glowing. Just darkness punctuated by headlights and the growing red and blue flash of emergency vehicles. Oh my God, Denise whispered beside her. The whole grid just failed. Someone had a flashlight. Then someone else lit their phone. The weak lights revealed 12 customers and 4 staff members standing in a diner that was already getting colder. The heating had died with the power, and winter was pressing against the glass like something hungry. "Everyone stay calm," Roy announced, trying to sound authoritative. "I'm sure the power company will have this fixed soon." But Clara was remembering Elias's words from a year ago. "I've got a solution that could save this entire city's power grid." And the news reports claims the grid will fail completely within a year. He'd been right. The ghost everyone mocked had been right. The temperature inside the diner dropped degree by degree. Customers bundled in their coats. Roy lit candles, creating small islands of light that only made the darkness beyond seem more absolute. The radio on someone's phone crackled with emergency broadcasts: "Total power failure. Entire metropolitan area. No estimated time for restoration. Seek shelter immediately." "We should go home," a customer said. In this, another gesture to the window where snow was falling harder now, accumulating on roads that would ice over without power for the traffic cameras and warning systems. "We're safer here." So they stayed. All of them, trapped in a diner that was transforming from refuge to potential tomb. Marcus passed out blankets from his car. Clara brewed coffee on the gas stove until Roy shut off the gas. "We don't know how long we'll need to make this last." Clara sat in booth 7, her booth, and watched the city die in the darkness beyond the windows. Every choice she'd made for the past year had led to this moment. She'd given everything to a stranger who'd promised to save a city, and now that city was freezing in the dark. She'd sacrificed her home, her safety, her dignity, all for faith in someone who'd vanished into basement workshops and rumors. And it had all been for nothing. "Hey," Marcus sat down across from her, his face ghostly in the candlelight. "You okay?" Clara laughed, a sound like breaking. "I'm homeless, freezing, and watching the city die because the guy I believe in failed." "So no, Marcus, I'm really not okay." "He didn't fail," Marcus said quietly. "The power's out. The whole grid's down. That's the definition of failure." "Is it?" Marcus looked toward the dark windows. "Or is this what had to happen before anyone would finally listen?" Before Clara could answer, the door burst open in a blast of snow and wind, and the last person she expected to see tonight stepped inside, carrying a case that hummed with its own internal light. Elias Thorne looked like he'd been living in a war zone. His coat was torn, his face was thinner than Clara remembered, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of months without real sleep. But those eyes were blazing with something that could only be called triumph. "Clara Vance," he said, and his voice cut through the murmur of confused customers like a knife. "I need your help one more time." Everyone in the diner turned to stare. Clara stood slowly, her heart hammering. "What?" "I need your diner's exterior power junction. And I need everyone to stay inside for the next 15 minutes. He set the case on the nearest table. It was making a sound like a heartbeat, a steady, electric pulse that didn't make sense in a world gone dark. "Who the hell are you?" Roy demanded. "The man who's about to turn your lights back on." Elias was already moving toward the back door, case in hand. "Clara, please. I kept my promise. I came back. Now I need you to trust me one more time." Clara looked at the case, at Elias, at the dark city beyond the windows. Every rational instinct screamed that this was another con, another dream that would collapse and leave her with even less than nothing. But she'd already lost everything betting on this man. What was one more leap of faith? "Do it," she said. Roy grabbed her arm. "Clara, you don't even know what he's." "I know enough." She pulled free and followed Elias toward the back door. "I know I gave him my last $20 a year ago, and I know he promised he'd come back. That's enough." The cold outside hit like a physical force. Elias moved quickly to the power junction box on the diner's exterior wall, working with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd performed this procedure 100 times in his mind. The case opened, revealing something that looked like a cross between a computer server and an alien artifact, circuits and processors arranged in a pattern that seemed to pulse with its own organic logic. "The relay switch," Elias said as he worked, his breath clouding in the cold. "The RX 47 I bought with your $20. It was the key that unlocked everything else. With that one piece, I could prove the concept, build the prototype, perfect the algorithm. He connected cables with steady hands. I've been testing in simulation for months, but I needed a real-world crisis to get anyone to pay attention. I needed them desperate enough to try anything. You let the grid fail. Clara's voice was sharp. People could die. People will die if nothing changes. This grid was already failing. I just accelerated the inevitable. He looked up at her, and in his eyes she saw not madness, but a desperate kind of sanity. I couldn't save Chicago, but I can save this city. I can show them what's possible. I just need 15 minutes. He connected the final cable. The device hummed louder, its internal light growing brighter. Get inside, Elias said. This part might be dramatic. Clara backed toward the door, unable to look away. Elias stood in the snow with his hand on the device, his coat whipping in the wind, looking like some kind of modern Prometheus stealing fire from the darkness. Then he flipped the switch. The device screamed to life with a sound like singing. Light poured from it, not the harsh white of normal electricity, but something warmer, more organic. And then, like a wave spreading across the city, the lights began to come back. First the diner, blazing into existence with such sudden brilliance that the customers inside shouted in surprise. Then the streetlights marching down the block. Then buildings, one after another, windows glowing to life like eyes opening. The traffic signals, the store signs, everything powered by a grid that moments ago had been dead. Elias walked back to the diner door, leaving his device humming in the snow, and looked at Clara with exhaustion and vindication warring in his expression. Your $20 just saved a city, he said. Now let me show you what else it bought. Inside the diner, Elias set a laptop on the counter, powered impossibly by its own battery, and pulled up schematics that made Roy lean and despite himself. The Chicago failure happened because the AI algorithm couldn't handle real-time load balancing, Elias explained, his voice gaining strength as he talked. It tried to predict demand patterns, but couldn't adapt fast enough when reality diverged from projection. The system I built uses a completely different approach, distributed processing across nodes that communicate in real time, adjusting power flow microsecond by microsecond. That's actually brilliant, Marcus said slowly. You're not predicting. You're responding. Exactly. The relay switch Clara bought let me test the communication protocol. Without it, I would never have proven the concept worked. Elias looked at Clara, and something in his expression made her throat tighten. Everything built from that one component. Every iteration, every improvement, every line of code traced back to a $20 part bought with a waitress's rent money. He pulled out an envelope and set it on the counter. There's a check in there for $200,000. That's the return on your initial investment, calculated at what venture capitalists would call an obscene rate of interest. Clara stared at the envelope like it might bite her. What? I sold the patent yesterday. 3 different cities want to implement my system. The Department of Energy wants to fund a nationwide pilot program. He smiled, tired and genuine. And none of it would exist if you hadn't looked at a broken stranger and decided he was worth your last $20. The diner had gone silent. Everyone was staring at Clara, the saint of fools, the woman who'd traded her roof for a loser's dream, the waitress who'd been living in her car for 4 months because she'd bet everything on faith. Denise was the first to speak. Holy shit, Clara. There's more. Elias pulled out a business card. I'm starting a company to implement this system globally. I need someone on the board who understands that profit isn't the only measure of value. Someone who knows how to invest in people, not just projects. He set the card on top of the envelope. I need someone who sees what others miss. I need you, Clara Vance. Clara's hands were shaking. She looked at the envelope, at the business card, at the man she believed in when everyone else had called her crazy. Why? The word came out as a whisper. Why did you wait a year? Why did you let me lose everything? Elias's expression softened. Because I had to prove it worked. Not to you. You already believed. But to everyone else. To the investors, the city officials, the people who needed to see the system succeed in a real crisis before they trust it. He gestured at the lights around them. You invested in me when I had nothing. Now I'm investing in you when you have everything. The wisdom to see value where others see waste. The courage to bet on hearts instead of spreadsheets. That's worth more than any engineering degree. Roy cleared his throat. Clara, if you don't take that envelope, I'm going to question your sanity more than I already do. Clara picked up the envelope with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Inside was a check with so many zeros it looked fake. And underneath, a contract offering her a position on the board of Thorn Energy Solutions, with a salary that would change her life forever. I lived in my car, she said quietly, for 4 months. I showered at the gym. I ate day-old food. Rebecca was right. I traded my roof for your dream. No. Elias's voice was firm. You traded temporary shelter for permanent change. You invested in something that will warm millions of homes, power millions of lives, prevent the kind of catastrophe that killed people in Chicago. He paused. Your sister was wrong. You didn't trade your roof for my dream. You built a foundation for everyone's future. Clara looked around the diner at the people who'd mocked her, pitted her, called her the saint of fools. They weren't laughing now. They were watching her hold the proof that sometimes kindness isn't weakness and faith isn't foolishness. So, Elias said softly, will you help me save the world? Again, Clara folded the check carefully and slid it back into the envelope. Then she picked up the business card and looked at the title, Board Member and Chief Ethics Officer, Thorn Energy Solutions. Yes, she said, but first, you're buying everyone in this diner dinner. We've had a hard night, and your solution cost us our coffee. Elias laughed, the first real laugh she'd heard from him, and pulled out his wallet. Fair enough. And Clara? Thank you for being the only person in this city crazy enough to believe in me. Thank you for being worth it, she replied, and meant it with every fiber of her being. 6 months later, Clara stood in a high-rise office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The same city that had mocked her, that had watched her fall, that had called her a fool for believing in a stranger's vision. The office was hers. Chief Ethics Officer with a salary that still made her dizzy when she thought about it too long. She'd paid off her debts, moved into an apartment with heat that actually worked, and bought her mother dinner at a restaurant where she didn't have to check the prices. But the best part, the part that made everything worth it, was a knock on her door at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. Come in, Clara called. Rebecca stepped inside, her expression carefully neutral. She was wearing a business suit and carrying a portfolio that looked expensive. Clara, thank you for seeing me. Of course. Clara gestured to the chair across from her desk. What can I do for you? The words hung in the air between them, heavy with history. 6 months ago, Rebecca had been the one with power, with judgment, with the luxury of calling her sister stupid for choosing kindness over security. Now Rebecca needed something from the woman she'd mocked. My firm is interested in partnering with Thorn Energy Solutions, Rebecca said carefully. We represent several cities that want to implement your power system. I'm here to see if you'd be open to a meeting with our CEO. Clara let the silence stretch just long enough. Then, of course, have your CEO contact my assistant to schedule something. We're always interested in expanding our reach. Rebecca nodded, started to rise, then stopped. Clara, I was wrong. About everything. About you. About Elias. About what you did being stupid. She met Clara's eyes with something that might have been respect. You saw something no one else could see. You bet on a person when everyone else had given up on him. That's not foolishness. That's vision. No, Clara said quietly. It was just kindness. The kind you practice not because it makes you rich, but because it makes you human. She smiled. The wealth was just a side effect. The real return on investment was knowing I could still trust my instincts when everyone told me I was crazy. Rebecca left without another word. Clara watched her sister walk to the elevator, watched the doors close, and allowed herself one moment of vindication. Just one. Then she turned back to her window and looked out at the city. A city with lights that never failed anymore. A city powered by a grid that had been born from a crumpled $20 bill and a prayer offered in a rainy diner booth. Her phone buzzed. A text from Elias. Board meeting at 4. And Clara? Thank you. For everything. Clara typed back. Thank you for coming back. for proving that faith isn't foolish when you invest it in the right people. She put down her phone and looked at the framed $20 bill on her wall. Elias had insisted on framing the original bill she'd given him, the one that had started everything. Under was a small plaque that read, "The most valuable investment ever made. Given with faith, returned with interest." Clara smiled and went to prepare for the board meeting. She had a world to save, and this time, she had all the resources she needed to do it. But more importantly, she had the knowledge that she'd been right all along. That betting on a human heart, on a stranger's desperate vision, on kindness in a cold world, that wasn't madness. That was wisdom the world desperately needed to learn. If this story moved you, if you've ever been called crazy for believing in someone, drop a comment and let me know. What would you do if you had Clara's choice? Would you risk it all on faith or play it safe? Hit that subscribe button and tell me which country you're watching from. After you subscribe, I promise you're going to have a blessed week because you just witnessed proof that kindness is never wasted. Sometimes it just takes time for the universe to balance the ledger. Now go out there and be someone's Clara. The world needs more fools like her.